Welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is...
Phil, me, and Perch.
Hey, Phil. Glad to have you now. Phil, I have been neglected in my duties as a host because for the past few weeks, we have had our patient, loyal listener, Stockton Piner, waiting to have his letter read on air.
Yes.
I think we've mentioned that we have the letter a couple times, but we never get around to actually reading it.
Well, we've been busy,
Yeah.
and last episode was the live show.
I know. We always have our excuses, but where would we be without the grace of loyal listeners like Stockton Piner? Nowhere, Phil. Actually, would still be here. No one would be listening. But because who knows if anyone's actually even listening right now? Except we believe that Stockton Piner is listening. So Stockton and all you other fans who have written to us and keep on writing to us, we will eventually get to read your letters too when we have that few moments. So without further ado, Phil, can you read us Stockton Piner's lovely missive?
Yes, I can. He writes, "Hello, dynamic duo of podcasting. I wanted to write in because in a recent episode, you guys were wondering why everything in Tony Stark's life was in rubble in the latest issue of Invincible Iron Man. Also, you mentioned that you have not been reading Uncanny Inhumans, which is where the answer lies. First, let me say that I love the Uncanny Inhumans. I only read a few comics as a kid, mostly X-Men and Ghost Rider, but that was mostly just to look at the art. I didn't really understand the sequential storytelling of comics back then. My love of comic book characters mainly comes from the X-Men and Spider-Man cartoons of the 90s, Batman the Animated Series, and of course, movies. When Marvel launched Secret Wars last year, I figured it would be the perfect time to jump headlong into the source material, and the first title I picked up was Inhumans Attilan Rising. I was immediately drawn to the characters as well as the writing of Charles Soule. I followed Soule from Secret Wars to Uncanny Inhumans and have loved every issue. The first arc is Inhumans vs. Kang, with the fate of Black Bolt and Medusa's son Ahura hanging in the balance. The story takes some surprising turns as the former royal couple struggle for their son's life and soul. The second arc is all about the Quiet Room, which was one of my favorite parts of Attilan Rising. It is full of colorful characters, backroom dealings, and a healthy dose of my favorite new human, Frank McGee, aka Nerve, former NYC cop, imbued with glowing eyes which can emit a blinding light. Trust me, the power is much cooler than it sounds, and Soule finds some very creative uses for it. The current story ties in with Civil War II and features Medusa vs. Tony Stark after he kidnapped Ulysses to kick off the conflict. In retaliation, Medusa orders an all-out attack on Tony Stark's personal life with explicit instructions that nobody else should suffer in the assault. They wreck his financials and reputation and destroy his personal properties. There's an awesome scene where Lockjaw teleports into Tony's private garage and drops off a mouthful of grenades before bamfing out again. The twist comes when Medusa is betrayed by one of her own who aligns with Maximus the Mad, and together they blow up Stark Tower. Other terrorist ops are carried out against Stark facilities, and all done in the name of Medusa and New Attilan. The most recent issue ends with Iron Man attacking the Inhuman capital. Uncanny Inhumans is a really fun book, and it's a consistent thumbs up for me. If I had to recommend a single issue, check out issue 10, which is a one-shot spotlighting Reader, a mysterious Inhuman with a crazy power set. I just wanted to help you guys fill in some story gaps while at the same time pointing you in the direction of a great read. Now I need to catch up on Invincible Iron Man. Had to drop off after issue 9 because there are just too many books, but I am sure it will have a huge impact on Civil War II, and I am curious to see how it sets up Doom and Riri Williams for their respective stories. Sorry if I rambled on too long. Keep podcasting and I'll keep listening. Stockton Piner. P.S. All caught up on Ultimates. Second favorite title next division right now.
Very good. Thank you so much, Stockton. Really glad to have you write. I actually love Charles Soule as well. He did, I believe he was the last guy who did She-Hulk. He is the gentleman who is also a lawyer. Does some great stories, does some great writing, and
yeah, he's on Daredevil right now.
Yeah, he's a really great author. I actually also was a big fan of the Inhumans, and I loved the character you mentioned, the ex-NYPD cop. with the glowing eyes. I never really figured. I didn't really know what his power was. I actually thought he had some kind of supervision, but as they say, if he really had any supervision, would he be running around in that ridiculous outfit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's an old joke from Super Chicken. Fred says, "Can't you use your supervision to find him?" He says, "Honestly, Fred, if I had any supervision, would I be running around in this outfit?" No, but blinding light. Actually, I can see how that's you know what? Hey, blinding light, that's Dazzler's power. And yes, she finds great uses for it too. So I do see how that can be a cool power. And yeah, I've always, I wanted to read, see, same thing. I really wanted to read the Inhumans. I was like, oh, Inhumans, they're doing all this with the Inhumans. They've got Johnny Storm dating Medusa. What? How does Crystal feel about that? But every time I tried to read it, it's like, oh, well, here's all these other legacy books that you like too, Charlie, so why don't you read them too? Why don't you read them too? And it's like, oh. And I had to pick, and you have to pick. I didn't like when they crippled Gorgon, because I don't understand why, Tony Stark can still walk, but Gorgon can't. I don't, I'm sure maybe it's explained, exactly why his spinal injury is so much worse than whatever everyone who's had a corrected spinal injury has gone throughout the Marvel Universe, including Jack Flag, who now has a new spinal injury, but who knows, maybe it'll actually get all fixed again because of super alien technology. But yeah, I have reading, I really wanted to read Carnage. There's so many books I wanted to read, and it's like, why can't I be a millionaire and just read all the books? That's the question we have, Phil. But anyway, thank you, Stockton. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. It's nice to have other people do the work. And on your recommendation, I will pick up the next issue I can find of Uncanny Inhumans. I did that with Vision, and I loved Vision, and then I forgot to get the next issue of Vision. But I really wanted to get the next issue of Vision, and then I didn't get it. Stockton, thanks. Keep the recommendations coming. We will get a review of an Uncanny Inhumans, and hopefully turn some more people onto it too, because that's what keeps these shows going. And hey, my recommendation to you: pick up the Champions, because Viv's in it. And if you like the Vision, you might really like how Viv plays out in it. So that might be cool too. Okay, now Phil, because I've been listening to our episodes, and it seems like the last 3 episodes we've been doing reruns, because I am not the smartest man, and I keep on repeating myself. Speaking about diversity in comics and whether or not Marvel and making their choices to expand the diversity of comics is a good business model or a good thing. And of course, I didn't want to talk about it, but this week, who was on the cover of the Village Voice this week, Phil?
Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan.
Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan. And I got to tell you, and this is, I mean, Kamala Khan is the feature. She's the poster child. But this is really about all the expanded view of everyone in comics. I'm not going to go into a lot of details in this. I just want everyone to go online, go to Village Voice. I think it's villagevoice.com. You can read the article for free there. If you're in the New York metropolitan area, actually pick up the hard copy, because it's nice and it's beautiful. What I did want to mention, because it has just this great opening line, and I just want to read this to everyone, because I do think it emphasizes something about the issue of diversity in comics that, we as white males never think about. But every so often one of us does, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of a good point. Let me find the article here. 1 second. I'm flipping through my copy.
But he was excited, folks. He messaged me. He messaged it to all of us on Nuff Set and everything.
Oh yeah, because I walk by the Village Voice all the time, and I always, I used to read the Village Voice all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm a big reader, but okay. So it's the article is Ms. Marvel will save you now, and this is the opening line. A few years ago, a mandate went out in the offices of DC Comics. I never want to see Supergirl's panties again, wrote Matt Idelson, an editor of DC's Superman series, in an all-company email so epic it made headlines. The Supergirl shot was a staple, G. Willow Wilson said to me in a phone call. One of the few women writers to make it into the comics big leagues. Wilson likened the panty shot's iconic status in comic circles to the still of Marilyn Monroe standing on the subway grate. You look up at her panties. That was a thing that happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you say it out loud, you realize, oh, that's super creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like aged up Poison Ivy on Gotham right now.
No.
It's like, no, still super creepy. And they think, well, no, because now she's got a woman's body. It's like, yes, but she still has a child's mind. It's like, how you don't have sex with someone when they're drunk because they don't have the mental capacity to truly consent.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have sex with a woman with a 12-year-old's brain because she doesn't have the mental capacity to consent in the way that an adult would. So Gotham creepy, but Gotham has always been pretty creepy. So, I guess if you really want to look at Gotham in the grand arc of its creepiness, probably not uniquely creepy. It's just a sexual creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little weird, When it was all just weird fetish sexual creepy on Gotham, we could deal with it. But now it's like, now there's lines being crossed, kids. Okay. But that's enough about diversity and creepiness in the comic book industry, because we've talked a lot about this. And I don't want to do another episode where we do 20 minutes on that. So now, instead, we're going to talk about clothes. Phil, we read the prelude to the Clone Conspiracy,
mm-hmm.
coming out in the new Amazing Spider-Man series, and so essentially what we have here is we have the Jackal. He's resurrecting people, and he says that it's resurrecting. It's not cloning. It's resurrecting.
Reanimation.
Oh, that's what he said. It's more like reanimation.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly what it is, because that's a weird thing for him to say, because some of these bodies have been moldering in the grave for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So you're digging up these bodies and rebuilding those bodies from scratch. It may not be cloning, but it's still pretty creepy. And not in a Gotham-y way, but just a weird kind of Frankenstein-y way. And that seems to be the suggestion they're doing here. Now, I had come up with... Now, so I have two interesting theories on where these things are going to go. Okay. First interesting there, and honestly, I got to find out who's writing this book.
It's Dan Slott who's writing the Amazing Spider-Man book, and what was the name of the other guy? He wrote the Civil War II miniseries for Amazing Spider-Man, and he's the one him and his wife are on Captain Marvel right now.
I follow Dan Slott on Twitter. I wonder if he's following me and I don't know about it. Because I think this man stole my brilliant idea. Because as you may recall, I came up with this brilliant idea about, hey, the wizard's always cloning himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if clones have souls, then all those souls wind up in hell. Now, it's established in the Marvel universe that right now there is no king of... Well, actually, I think right now the king of hell might be Strongman, or I don't know exactly what the status is of that. In the last Thunderbolts, they went to the realm of Mephisto, and there was all this battling and fighting and whatnot. But I was thinking, if you are a clone and your soul goes to hell,
mm-hmm.
and then another clone of you goes to hell, and you are these two clones of the same person, what if you work together? And what if there's this whole army of clones in hell that could then unite and fight their war? And you had mentioned to me that, the Jackal was always making clones of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And constantly making these different clones of himself. And one of his clones even, which we'll get to when we get to the Jessica Jones discussion in multi-universality, one of them actually had just lived a little quiet suburban life with Gwen Stacy until Peter Parker killed him. Or with a Gwen Stacy clone until Peter Parker killed him. And what is interesting to me is, like, wouldn't it be interesting if what's going on with the Jackal is all of his clones got together
mm-hmm.
in the afterlife, and that they were able to exert enough force in the afterlife to influence whatever the current Jackal is in this world, to allow him to transcend his previous work and enter into this world of reanimation. Because I think there has to be a mystical quality to this. That there is something where it is this idea of not just bringing the bodies back, but maybe even in some way bringing the souls back. Although but that gets to what I think is the most interesting crazy fan theory I have about this right now, Phil. Remember what happened to Dr. Otto's? Remember what happened to Otto's body after he died?
Yeah, wasn't it stolen from his grave?
It was stolen from his grave. Now, who would have used to steal Otto Octavius's body from the grave?
The Jackal.
The Jackal. Now, the Jackal is reanimating these people. So he decides he's going to reanimate the recently deceased Dr. Octopus. And he's going to rebuild his body. But he's going to remove all the impurities and imperfections. So he's going to make it the young, handsome, swarthy Dr. Otto Octavius. Ripped abs and everything. But when he recreates the brain pattern, when he recreates the soul, if you will, whose brain pattern is on that brain right now? Think about it, Phil.
Well,
whose brain pattern is?
Well, here's a thought. You're always saying, is this even the original Otto because he's died and had made copies of his brain so many times? So is it possible that we get two Ottos?
Well, sort of. What I think is going to happen is Jackal's going to recreate Otto, but that Otto is going to be Peter Parker.
Oh.
So it's going to be Peter Parker's brain in the new perfected Otto's body. But of course, he does have all of Otto's memories. So he's like, I have to play along. I've been saved from death. I have to fight. And then you're going to have Otto, the superior Otto, with Peter Parker's brain, fighting Parker because he thinks that has to be Otto in his body. And then you're going to have little Robo Otto trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? And then he has to go into, I think that's where we're going to with this. Mark my words. You're going to get a resurrected Otto, and it's going to be Peter's minding. Because I got to figure that he's like recreating the brain at the moment of death kind of thing. But at the moment of death, that brain thought it was Peter Parker.
So
it's going to be
two things. The Otto brain that that's in the robot now. I wonder if he's going to try to dump his brain patterns into a Peter Parker clone. We get Superior Spider-Man back, and two.
No. He wants to go back into his. He said he needs to go back into his body because the inferior Parker brain is why he was unable to solve his problems. Unless
he can grow an Otto brain in a Peter Parker body.
I guess that's a possibility.
Yeah, but
But
I was gonna say, well, no, if he resurrects Otto's body with Peter's brain in there, maybe they're gonna say that's the original Peter, and they're gonna get that brain back into Spider-Man's body. Maybe that's why Peter Parker is such a foul up these days, because he's incomplete.
Possibly, because I think what you're gonna get. Well, here's what I think you're actually gonna get. I think you're actually gonna get this conversation between everybody, and it's going to be this idea, because this is something that Peter said at the time after he got his old brain back, which he says, I don't know if my brain was in Otto's body, or I don't know if my mind was in Otto's body, or Otto just thought he was me and I thought I was Otto. And I think that's what is going to be the discussion of exactly what happened, and that what Otto's going to think he's Peter. And trying to fight him, but then Peter's going to say, "No, I'm not Otto anymore. I'm Peter. I'm still Peter."
What I'm saying,
and then you're going to have,
Well, I'm sorry, I was going to say, but the Peter Parker who's here now, I'm saying he might not be complete because remember, when, well, he thought he was Otto or Otto was in his head, whatever. Otto was deleting Peter Parker's memories and his personality out of that brain. So who says that's a complete Peter Parker in there right now? Because he just
well, arguably he pulled back all of his mind when, and essentially the answer to that is what Charles Xavier said when he told Tony Stark that he could, make him think his name was Deborah, and make him wear a dress and think his name was Deborah. He can do that, but there's always going to be a part of Tony Stark's brain that says, no, this isn't right. No, this isn't who I am. And eventually the true self will reassert itself. To some extent, what Otto said is correct. The reason why Peter was able to defeat Otto is because it was Parker's brain. That he couldn't remain in there because Parker's brain eventually reasserted itself. And what I always said was that I think at times what it really was that Peter wanted an excuse to be Otto, wanted the freedom of being a supervillain. Because it is very freeing and very liberating. And that's that part of Peter that's very, because we all have a dark side. And let's not forget, Peter's original thing, the second he got powers, he didn't go, oh, I'm going to be a superhero. He said, how can I make money? How can Peter do for Peter? And he puts that aside because of the guilt. But once Otto gave him a way to not feel guilt by pretending to be Otto, suddenly he was more than happy and more than capable of doing a lot of stuff. Now, what we're seeing right now is, of course, Peter is back into being Peter. And we can say, well, the reason why Peter's being such a screw-up is because he's incomplete. But the fact of the matter is, Peter was always a screw-up. One thing that Otto... that you can say for Otto is he saw right through Peter and said, how did this guy survive? It's like, how does he not have his degree? How is he not doing the basic stuff that a super genius superhero should be doing? Why do I have to go and somehow make him into Dr. Peter Parker? When this is all stuff this man should have been doing decades ago. Or years ago, at least, and that's the thing of it. But like I said, my view on it is that if what he's doing is recreating these bodies at the moment of death, through some quasi mystical, quasi scientific means, then when he does that for Otto, it's going to be Peter's brain inside. And then what you're going to have is you're going to have the Otto machine. And then you're even going to have the Otto machine sort of saying, am I really Otto or am I just a program? And if I'm just data in a machine, what am I? And I think it's going to be a nice, interesting three-way conversation. Otto and Peter sitting down and trying to decide what to do. And in the end, they'll probably decide, well, I need to be back in Otto. That we need to reassert Otto's brain because it's going to do that eventually. Otto's still somewhere, because I'm still Otto as much as anyone is Otto, It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I for one, am very excited by this. I was not into the clone conspiracy until I started coming up with a crazy fan theory, and that's how Marvel gets me to buy all their books. Is I come up with a crazy fan theory that they then never use. Except this time they're using a crazy fan theory that sounds like one that I suggested for the Wizard. So I'm like, what you doing here? Are you following me, Dan Slott? And Dan Slott, I'm happy if you're stealing my ideas. Any of these ideas, I always say, hey, these ideas are for you, Marvel. You guys like my ideas? Take them. I would love it if you would actually, ask me to come by one day and maybe get a tour of the factory and maybe let me pitch you some ideas. It's an office building. I don't know how much of a tour there is. It's like, yeah, that's where we eat lunch, and this is a guy's office where he works. It's an office. I went there as a kid. I remember right after junior high graduation, I went there, and that was back when I met a really nice guy. I don't even know who it was. But he was one of the editors at the time, and he was He came out and he sat with me, talked to me, and gave me the guide, the submission guidelines for Marvel, because that was when they took open submissions back in the day. And it says, here's how you do it. Just write something up and send it to us. We're happy to read it. We will read it. We'll send you a rejection letter. We didn't say this. Send a rejection letter, but it said, it was really good advice. It was, write a one-shot story, because we're basically, if we use you as a new writer, it's probably just going to be for a one-shot story. It's going to be something, but show us what you got, and we'll see what you got. Dark Horse still does open submissions. I really have to send all the things I have to write. I have decided I need to write. My goal is November is novel writing month, so I'm going to try and get back to writing by November. Hopefully start sometime in October, and hopefully by the end of November actually have something that I can say, hey, I wrote something again, because I have not written in so long. Anyway, any other thoughts on the clone conspiracy, Phil?
The only other thing I was just thinking of, if they're not clones and they're just the originals reanimated, does that mean that's the original Gwen Stacy?
Well, it could be, although you know what, there is one flaw in that argument. That flaw is, we see that there's a bunch of Jackal clones around.
Yes.
Dupes, as he says. And like I said, when I saw the dupes, it got me wondering, because at first I didn't realize that was the Jackal. I didn't realize who that was supposed to be. And it struck me that, making this obvious, I knew it was a scientist, and I knew it had to be a scientist from the 60s or 70s by the way it was drawn. I love when they do that, where they'll draw someone and you can see the influence of the original art style on it. And having himself as essentially his henchman is a very interesting point, and why I think that whatever the new Jackal is, if it is all the souls of the dead, Jackals that have sort of come back, and that maybe all the dead souls of the Jackals have merged and came back as this superior Jackal. And then relegating his old body to this, essentially servile work is an interesting statement to it. I'm not quite sure what it means, but or maybe just has them as backups that he could jump into at a moment's notice. That's an interesting concept too. Or maybe these are just all of his old clones that he has now reanimated to be his servants, because it does seem to be that when you are reanimated, you do come under his sway and his power. So, it does seem to be some sort of reanimation. Now, you had said that previously the High Evolutionary had said that he was never actually making clones, but taking other people and then overwriting them to be these other people. That he couldn't grow a fully grown human. He'd have to take an actual human and then just rewrite them to be the clone.
Yeah, it was like in the late 80s, they originally made it seem like, the High Evolutionaries told Peter Parker that, the Jackal wasn't cloning people. He was basically just creating like a tailor-made virus that rewrote people's DNA. So like he said, the Jackal the original Spider-Man clone was like one of the Jackal's old assistants, and the original Gwen Stacy clone was really one of his former students. But then in the Clone Saga, they kind of retconned that back, because I guess they said the High Evolutionary was lying because he didn't want people looking in the cloning and then into his techniques, because the High Evolutionary thought if humanity was going to get anywhere, it was through like his work and not cloning. He thought cloning like kind of lessened the gene pool.
Well, but what if? So here's my take on that. What if they're both right? Maybe that was how he started. Maybe he eventually got to a point where he was doing real cloning, but that he started with just this idea of this programmed retrovirus. And maybe now what he's done is he's figured out how to program those retroviruses to go into the old bodies
Mm-hmm.
the dead bodies and reanimate them. Possibly, possibly this is something he was able to create. And it would explain why he says these are them, this is the real them, and it is their brains, it is their memories at the point of death, because it's recreating what their brains were at when they died, is the idea. And which is why if they recreate Otto, it is going to be Otto at the moment of his death when he thought he was Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be interesting. Now, along those same lines, we got another great conspiracy this week. What was that, Phil?
Refresh me. What was the other? The Jessica Jones conspiracy.
Oh, yes. Now, this is written by Michael Brian Bendis. And essentially what we have is, remember when we were talking about Jessica Jones and I was saying, it's funny that Jessica Jones is so popular as this hard-drinking, hard-fighting, hard-cussing lady, because that ain't who she is in the comics anymore. Now she's the mom of the Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
Literally, she's a woman with a baby that makes her a mom, and as such, she is fully separated from her hard-cussing, hard-drinking, hard-fighting days, which is kind of a very chauvinistic take on it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But this is comic books. And that chauvinism is displayed here. It is this idea that, that she had been essentially neutered. Essentially, the wild stallion broken. The manic pixie dream girl made into your wife. And that is bad. But not any better is what we have here, which is that Jessica Jones has now she no longer has her baby. We don't know where she is. She is getting out of prison at the start of the episode. Her and Luca broke up, so she's single and footloose again. And what happens next, we don't know. But we do know that she's been asked to figure out what's going on with this woman's husband. Now, she thinks her husband is probably insane. And it's an interesting thing, because it's like, well, this is the Marvel Universe. This kind of stuff does happen. It's like, yeah, this kind of stuff does happen to one person once a month out of 6 billion people. So the odds are still very much against you. It's like this. Most people in the Marvel Universe, when they fall into a vat of radioactive waste, still die a horrible death.
Mm-hmm.
Every so often, one comes out with superpowers, but the vast majority are still dying a horrible death. And so and of course, in this world, we do have all this extraordinary stuff that does happen. It probably feeds into this want to believe that something good will happen, or that there is something more to it. We were talking about, with the Terrigen mist clouds, in the Death of X, and how, all these people now are like that. When it first came, people were afraid, but now everyone's lining up and hanging out to breathe that Terrigen mist because, hey, there's a chance we'll get superpowers. Now, there's also a chance you might get turned into a doorway. As Eldrick learned, there is a chance you might get turned into a giant dog who cannot speak, like Lockjaw learned. But nobody thinks they're going to be the one that turns into a giant dog. Everyone thinks I'm the one that's going to turn into the supermodel with great hair. Like Medusa. Yeah, I mean, everyone expects that to be their outcome. But, of course, people turn into lizard monsters and all sorts of things, which aren't necessarily the worst thing you could be. I mean, it's fine to be a lizard monster if that's what you are. But, people are willing to take the risk because they hope that something good will happen. And in this situation, when the guy starts talking about he's from an alternate dimension, is essentially giving a Marvel Universe version of the Mandela effect. Well, not the Mandela effect, but more the Berenstein Bears theory. That, what dimension you were originally from tells you if you remember them be called the Berenstein Bears or the Berenstein Bears or the Berenstain Bears. I forget which one it is. But, you know, it's an extrapolation on that. This guy wakes up and he says, "I remember my life was this 8 months ago when all the craziness happened, when we thought the world was going to end and then it didn't." And what we know is that Franklin Universe saved the universe and put everybody back, but maybe didn't put everyone back where he found them, because he is still a child and kids never put their toys back when they're done. And one of the things that they were, that because they do a shout out in this to the Fantastic Four, they say no one even talks about them anymore, because of course the Fantastic Four, Sue and Reed and Franklin and Valeria and a bunch of other people are in essentially the beyond, recreating the multiverse. So they give a shout out to that. Then they give a shout out to the ultimate conspiracy. And this is one of these things I was thinking, Gwenpool said when she was doing her came up with Ultimate Spider-Man that, only people that were important got pulled over. So if this guy came over, it has to be because the writer wanted to do something with him, that he was something that was important to the story. But when you think about it, if you have a guy like Gank coming into this universe, it stands to reason that a lot of other people are coming into this universe too. A lot of other versions of things are. And here's where it could get very interesting. It may not be the guy that's from the Ultimate Universe. It could be his wife. Because it was something with his wife in that universe that influenced the way that everything had to play out in order for Gank and Miles and their other friend to be here and to be in their situation. Because it all has to make sense retroactively. So there are probably many people who got pulled in but don't know why they're here. And this guy, for whatever reason, was just a guy that he could see that the world had changed, whether it's just a little bit of latent mutant powers, or maybe he fell into a vat of nuclear waste at some point. But Cypher, that was one of the things. That's one of his, when they brought Cypher back and they amped up his powers to say, here's actually all the things you could do with a guy that can translate any language. And one of his powers is he can see when the universes change. So, right now, that's why you haven't seen Cypher recently, because Cypher knows everything that's going on. And maybe he's just trying to figure out, well, what do I do about this? Do I tell people and freak people out, or do I just say, well, this is okay?
But yeah, even even the thing with people coming over from the Ultimate Universe and stuff, even people who were dead are coming over, because Miles Morales' mom was killed over in the Ultimate Universe, but she's alive and well here now.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, that maybe there were people that were brought over from more than just one universe. Because remember, it was an infinite multiverse. So when Franklin's putting it all back together, and of course with Miles, it was actually, the thing to remember is it wasn't Franklin who did that. It was the Molecule Man. The Molecule Man put things back, possibly unbeknownst to Franklin. And that may be why we're seeing all the supervillains coming back to life. Because the Molecule Man decided that he was going to have an influence on all this stuff. We know the Molecule Man is tied to the original Beyonder, and I'm still waiting for Frank to come back. Because it all has to tie back to Frank from Bayonne. But yeah, I do think that whatever we're going to be getting in Jessica Jones is going to tie back to the greater Ultimate Conspiracy, the Franklin Conspiracy, and possibly maybe how things get revealed. Now, the big question for us, because of course the other ongoing question in Jessica Jones is, where is Danielle? And as I said when we were discussing this in Superconnectivity or in All New Marvel Roundup, there are three basic possibilities. The first possibility, the logical possibility, is that she took her daughter somewhere safe. And she had her daughter be with someone who could take care of her, basically an Agatha Harkness type character. Someone that could keep her away from the craziness and nonsense of the superheroic community, because she knows she's not safe. Now, the other option we discussed was the Skrull option. Because as you will remember at the end of Secret Invasion, Jarvis Skrull stole Daniela. And for the life of me, I have no idea how that was resolved. I don't know if they ever gave an in-story resolution to how they got the baby back from Jarvis. And then the third option is that when the universe was recreated, Daniela just disappeared. And what happened to her next, we don't know. But we do know she's coming back from the future in U.S. Avengers. Because she's the Captain America of the future. She is the Shield, as she says, with her diamond hard skin and whatnot. And it's a very interesting question, exactly what we're going to be seeing when this story plays out. But they definitely have set up a lot of very interesting mysteries at the start of this, and have telegraphed certain outcomes. Now the question is what they're telegraphing what we're supposed to follow, or are these all red herrings?
Well, I think the whole thing with her coming back from the future, that's probably what's going to happen. Because, I mean, think about this. I mean, I'm sure it's just because when she was created, but I mean, Jessica Jones could be like a walking time anomaly too, because she was never in the Marvel Universe till Bendis created her, in the early 2000s?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of retconned it in where, she interacted with the Avengers and everyone early on, so...
And who else has been having that happen to him?
Who?
Deadpool.
Oh, yes.
And do you know who had it as well? The Sentry.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the theory that the Sentry is the adult Franklin Richards.
Oh.
Trying to force himself through a fractured psyche back into the Marvel Universe. Or the Sentry could just be an alternate universe Franklin Richards. There's all sorts of interesting theories. The idea that maybe, there is something going on at the Marvel Universe, and I don't know if people are just having fun throwing red herrings out there for everyone, or if there's a real concerted thought and process to everything. But you think about everything from the Cage Around Eternity, which is this nail on the head of sliding time, which of course, and there is that fan theory out there that all of sliding time relates to Franklin Richards. That Franklin Richards essentially has kept the Marvel Universe in a constant state of adolescence because he didn't want to grow up. So in order for him not to grow up, for him to be Peter Pan, he had to keep everything in a static state, which meant he had to cage eternity.
Well, here's a theory. Maybe it isn't that Franklin put stuff back, the universe back wrong, or, bringing people over from the Ultimate Universe. Maybe time and space are going funky because Franklin is outside the universe right now. He's not here to hold it all together. They basically just slapped a cage around eternity and said, okay.
So maybe the universe, you think about it. We never got back to that whole time is fractured thing. We never got back to the fact that everything is not working. When we got to Secret Wars, the whole point of the Ultimate 616 universe that existed, the Double Manhattan, was that you can't have all of the same characters in the same place. You can't have this many duplicates in the same place. It's going to tear this world apart. It's creating these anomalies. And, if you have this idea that the universe was already fractured, and that, you could even start off with this, man, you can even dig it off into Kang. Kang, here's an interesting thing about Kang, okay? If we follow the data that we've been given, Kang is a descendant of Nathaniel Richards. Because when Nathaniel Richards built his time machine, rather than going backwards or forwards in time like he intended,
he went sideways.
He went sideways. He went to an alternate universe. He went into a variation on again, something that Reed Richards just brought up, the universe where World War II was fought in space.
Mm-hmm.
But in that one, when the lunar colonies rebelled, they blew up the moon. So they created a doomsday device that essentially decimated the world.
Mm-hmm.
And in that decimated world, the warlord came, who was Nathaniel Richards. And then Nathaniel Richards had his other son, who is the lineage from which Kang derives. So Kang isn't even from our universe in that theory. He's not from a Reed Richards line. He's actually from the Nathaniel line.
Mm-hmm.
In that theory, which means that the fact that he's always interacting with the 616 is possibly because of this sideways linkage of time by Nathaniel Richards that essentially shattered the universe.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been, even something like that might have been what pierced the universes that allowed the Beyonder to look in. And when, of course, the Beyonder reached out to Owen Reese, that's what caused the fracturing of the Beyonders and all this kind of stuff. And what was once all one thing became many things, and wackiness ensued. There's a lot of deep dive stuff going on here, and we've been talking for a little more than our normal time. We just want to pull the Band-Aid off and call it a day, Phil, or do you want to talk more?
No, that's good. I mean, we hit a lot of stuff. We hit Miss Marvel, we hit Clones, we hit Jessica Jones, we hit the Broken Time.
Oh, have I stated my? I don't think. Okay, one last thing. Okay, and hey, since all you Marvel guys are listening to my podcast for my great ideas, here's one I want you to deal with. Okay, Ms. Marvel doesn't have unstable molecules. Her bracelets are just her old grandmother's bracelets that, Bruno sort of made into kind of a thing. And of course, we know that the bracelets have some kind of tie to their Inhuman heritage because they've been passed down for generations and stuff like that. There's something crazy about the bracelets too. But the bracelets change size with Kamala. And all of Kamala's clothes change size with Kamala. Also, Kamala clearly has superhuman strength when she's utilizing her powers, which raises this question: is Kamala not just a shapeshifter? Is a shapeshifter like the Impossible Man is a shapeshifter? That she has complete control over every molecule in her body, and is in that sense almost an unstoppable force of a being who can just alter herself into any structure she so desires. She may not have done so yet because at the moment, mentally, that's a big thing. It's one thing to stretch or to embiggen or in small in. It's a whole other thing to turn yourself into an automobile or a rocket ship or any of the other millions of things that she has the power to do but has not yet done. Along those same lines, so Marvel guys, follow this. You need to team her up with Boulder, who has the equal and opposite power set. Again, a person who has no access to unstable molecules, but his outfit that he got at Kmart is just as invulnerable as he is. His shirt never burns. When he's being shot by lasers, he just says it tickles. When he gets shot by lasers, there's no tears or rips in that stuff when he gets attacked by dozens of supervillains. Actually, superheroes in that case, because the supervillains took him hostage. He comes out without a scratch because all of his molecules are in a static state. But again, completely under control. And to, I guess, what we'll call that superheroic aura around him. You might even have this idea that in the same way that Kamala can alter the molecules around her, maybe she could even extend that further. Maybe she can embiggen other people. Maybe she can shrink in other people if she maintains a physical contact.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe she can alter the shape or size of anything she's touching. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe she is as powerful as a molecule man, and maybe Boulder has that equal opposite power of stasis. Maybe she is change and he is stasis, and they should team up and fight crime. He's a teen hero too, and he's invulnerable. Come on, Marvel, give Boulder a shot. Okay, that is enough of my rant for this week. Phil, if people would like to talk to you, say, please ask Charlie to stop pushing Boulder on people. Boulder is like fetch. Boulder is not going to happen. Where can they write to you or talk to you about that, Phil?
Well, if Dan Slott would like to steal any more ideas from you, he could email me nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp. And just check out all my other podcasts and blogs at southgatemediagroup.com.
And, of course, you can always write to me anytime you'd like to in that old-fashioned email way at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter as I live tweet various things, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Legends of Tomorrow, and of course, The Incredible Hulk, 7 o'clock on Saturdays at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And, of course, I'm live tweeting Legends of Tomorrow because I'm going to be on Legends of DC podcast of tomorrow with Zachary Hare. Coming soon, when that show comes back, we're going to discuss the show, and I will do my best to try and drive Zachary Hare slowly mad, and he will do the same thing. First one to gouge out his own eyes wins, or loses. I forget what that was. And of course, you can always listen to the Gamma Cast that I'm also do now with Maz Manzoor, and you can listen to me with Maz Manzoor on the Cage Cast, where we're going to be talking about the grand new wonderful Netflix series Luke Cage, which Zachary Hare didn't really like. So that's how I got that gig. So very happy about that. And of course, always listen to me on World's Finest with Phil Parrish and Lilith Hellfire as I do a marvelous review once a week. Is that everything, Phil?
I believe so, Mr. Show.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing everything I can, man. I got to build up this podcasting because, I get paid nothing for each podcast I do. So if I do 10 podcasts, I'll get 10 times what I normally make.
10 times 0.
Okay, folks. Thanks for connecting us with us this week. Please connect with us. Good night.